Welcome. Welcome, everybody. Thank you for joining us for this latest edition of ProductTank London. Meetups for product people by product people. I myself am a product person. I'm currently a senior PM over at Sokin. I'm really excited to have you all here today. We've got a very special event planned for you. For those that have been before, you will know there are a number of ways you can get involved in the ProductTank community. You can speak at a ProductTank event. You can host or sponsor. You can also write for Mind the Product or even get involved online. I want to say a massive thank you today to our sponsor, Pendo, that has enabled us to bring you all together and keep everyone well fed and watered throughout the evening. A little bit of housekeeping. So this evening we'll be using Slido to do our Q&A at the end. I'll flash this up at multiple points throughout the presentations. Please just take an opportunity to scan that. If you have any questions, note them down. Folks can then upvote, and we will take the questions there at the end in the Q&A section. So today is a very special day. We are celebrating 15 years of ProductTank London. Can I get a great woohoo? So on today's special event, we have assembled some of the original crew. We have Janna on the founding team, James, who came in to help commercialize, and of course, Mark, who helped take ProductTank to many cities around the world. It's going to be a really exciting event, and I'm really looking forward to hearing what everyone has to say. A quick look back over the years. We have had many a founder and CEO up on the stage here talking to you about all things product, including the legendary Marty Kagan. And who remembers when Monzo was called Mondo? Well, they were here too. Funnily enough, back in 2016, we were talking about the changing landscape of being a product manager. Here, around 10 years later, we're talking about the future of product management. Funnily enough, some things maybe don't change that much. Back in 2016, we were in over 30 cities, and now, here in 2025, over 200 cities worldwide. So today, that's enough from me. I'm really excited now to pass on to Janna from the founding team to take us through the history of PM and, of course, the genesis of Now Next Later.
So much. All right, thank you so much for that warm intro, and it is fantastic to be here. Great to be back here at the Conway Hall. We were trying to figure out how long we've been running this thing at Conway Hall, and we figured it to be, I don't know, somewhere in the middle, like 2016, 2017. But yeah, so it's been a minute, and it's great to be back. So I'm here to, I was honored to be asked back to talk about some of the, what we've seen over the last 15 years in product management. So I want to take you back to, where we were 15 years ago, and a little bit before and a little bit afterwards as well, and see where it's taking us. So think back to where you were 15 years ago. Who was actually in product management back then? All right, what else were people doing? I mean, parties. Anybody coming from development? Anybody, development background, marketing, customer-facing background, students? Yeah, okay. See, this is the next generation of product people. I'm really feeling it. I'm supposed to be turning 40 in a couple days. I say I'm supposed to be, like I can avoid it. But hey, and so I'm looking back on actually my last 20 years as a product person. That's basically about how long I've been doing this. And like a lot of people in my cohort, us 40-something product people, we all fell into it because no one had heard of product management back then. We were all doing stuff. Like I was a customer support rep type thing at a tech-ish company. And I fell into the role because apparently I was good at talking to both the customers as well as talking to the developers, and so they made me this IT contact. Eventually, it was called Junior Product Manager. And I remember when my boss gave me the promotion into Junior Product Manager, and he was telling me about this role, and I was like, that sounds cool, right? There's manager in it, and I like product. What is it? And I can't remember the exact explanation, but it didn't help me. I didn't understand what it was, and I was like, all right, well, it sounds kind of like what I'm doing, talking to customers and talking to tech, I guess. But I went back to my desk that day and I Googled it, and I was like, what is product management? And there weren't really many helpful articles. There wasn't much out there. No one really describing what it was or what I was supposed to do. I kind of had a sense that I was supposed to write these things called PRDs or specs. PRDs was the thing back then. My first PRD was 80 pages long. Because I thought that's what was needed. I needed to spec it all out into huge detail. It used UML and all sorts of stuff, because one of the devs convinced me that the devs spoke UML. They don't read it. So it was the first and last time I wrote a spec that big. And that sort of helped set the stage for me questioning what good product management was and whether I was doing it right. Now, question it or not, I mean, I was pulled into a junior product manager role. They'd plucked a developer basically the same day from the dev team and made him senior product manager. So he didn't know what he was doing either. I had no guidance. And so as you can imagine, I did product management really badly for a few years, right? I had no one around me. I couldn't talk to anybody about what I was doing. And, I just sort of did what sort of helped get things across the board. But, at that point in time, this is back in the days when to get a release out, you had to sort of pitch your product idea, your feature idea to the development team who was on a different floor and didn't talk to you and wasn't nice to you, and try to get your release into that quarter's release. And if it didn't get into that release, it didn't get released then, maybe next time, next quarter. So it was just kind of a different pace, a different time, and lots of different frustrations with how we did things back then. But, I mean, over time, I iterated, I learned, I figured out what was working and what wasn't working. But it wasn't until I moved to the UK. So I started my career in Canada. I grew up in Toronto area. Anybody from Canada around here? Just me? Cool. All right. Grew up in Toronto, started my career in Montreal, and at that point in time, I'd gotten bitten by this bug. I was like, wait, I'm a junior product manager at this bigger tech-ish company that's not very cool. It's not working the way that, I think I could be working. I wanted to be take on a bigger role at a smaller company. And I applied for all the jobs in Montreal. There weren't many product management jobs, so I applied for jobs that didn't even exist, trying to tell them they needed a product manager. It didn't work, right? This is 2008, 2009, when the entire world had crashed, all the jobs had come with it, and there wasn't much to do. There's a lot like these days, actually. And so I widened my search. I was like, well, what about getting jobs in Vancouver or Toronto? And applied to places like those. No, nothing there. And so I actually have the privilege that my parents are British, so I could always return to the motherland if needed. And so I applied for a job in London, and I got a call back within 12 hours. And I was like, oh, London is hiring. London's calling. Let's go. And long story short, I quit everything and dropped everything, sold my house, and just moved to London in my mid-20s. It was so cool, right? And I actually lived not far from here, literally 50 yards. It was so cool. Actually, no, my first place wasn't 50 yards from here. It was a really, really leaky, terrible, cold studio in Camden, and then eventually settled here and got myself a job at a startup, and started having more influence in things, but still didn't really have much in the way of people to talk to or people to inform whether I was working on the right thing. And this startup that I joined ran into a problem that I later learned was what I call now the agency trap. I joined this company thinking that I was going to be a B2C product manager. What I was actually going to be was more of a B2B2C, as in selling to clients and working out their needs, project manager. Right? That whole thing of thinking you're going to be working on product stuff, but actually working on client-by-client delivery stuff. And so I figured that out in the first week. But I didn't have the vocabulary that I do now, so I couldn't describe what was wrong with this business or why it actually ultimately wasn't on the right path. And so I persisted in this role, trying to figure it out. But ultimately what they kept doing was taking client requirements, bundling them up, telling the product team this is what they needed to deliver, and then putting it on me to go deliver it. And also having the expectation that, we were funded, we were going to go do the big growth thing anytime now, but we weren't doing the big growth thing, right? And it took a while to figure out. It actually took me years afterwards to figure out what was going on, but basically we were selling the time that we should have been spending on discovery for the wider client base to figure out how this platform could go from here to here to here to here, and instead spent our time doing the bidding of the highest paying client for that particular month. And it meant that we never really got that scale. We just sort of plodded along and along and along. And I see this now in retrospect, and now I have the vocabulary to call it out. And I call it the agency trap, when you're a product company, but you're trapped like acting like an agency. And so, I mean, this is all to say that I worked in various places and saw product management done badly quite a few different ways before I actually met another product manager who I ended up spending many years working with, and I still work with today, Simon Cast. He's my co-founder on both the ProdPad and Mind the Product side. But when we met, I was just like, wait, you're a product manager, I'm a product manager. Remember, events like this didn't exist. It was hard to find other product people. I never met another product person who wasn't like directly in my company, and there weren't many of those either. So I was like, whoa, another product manager in the wild. We should hang out, we should talk. We had a few beers, and I pitched to him this idea that I'd been hearing of that was going on in the States called Product Camp. Product Camp was like this event where a bunch of people would come together, usually on a weekend or whatever, some spare time, and make it up as they go, but generally just share what they know about product management. And I was like, that sounds really cool, I want to do that. So I pitched this idea of doing a product camp to Simon, because Product Camp had never existed in London before. And he agreed on the spot, and I woke up the next morning thinking, did he actually agree? Right, let's connect with him on LinkedIn and see if he's still in on this. And he was, and so we started planning out what was to become the first ever product camp. But as we were working these plans out, we started talking to people that, other product people, we started reaching out to people, and somebody said, wait, you're doing this thing called Product Camp. You need to meet this guy called Martin Erickson. You guys know Martin? Because he's thinking about starting this thing called ProductTank. You guys seem to be doing the same thing. And so we connected with Martin and then realized that actually, yeah, we were kind of doing something very similar, events for product people. None of us had actually run our first event yet. And so we ended up running the first ever ProductTank on the back of a product camp to kind of give it some oomph, some legs. Where that ended up, the first proper product tank was held this time, 15 years ago, in a room above a pub in London, in central London. It was in Leicester Square. I think it was called Ruby Blue, and the pub was literally like this little room above. It was the size of this stage, and there were maybe 20 or so people there. And no one was recording it. I think it was Martin's company bought the beers. We got a few rounds, it was great. And got to meet some product people, and I still know some of those product people today. But also what really struck me is that I still remember one of the first talks. I think we had 2 speakers that night, and one of them told this story that I still remember to this day. And it's no longer as relevant to us today, but I think some of the lessons are. So there was a chap who worked at Yahoo Answers. Y'all remember Yahoo Answers? Yeah, okay. And the thing with Yahoo Answers is you never went to yahooanswers.com or whatever it was, because you just sort of find yourself on Yahoo Answers. You type something in, a question you have, and you'd find out somebody else had asked that same question, and so you'd end up on Yahoo Answers. This is before Quora even, right? And so he was talking about working at Yahoo Answers, and the time that somebody there made a change, an accidental change, to the robots.txt file, right? Am I dating myself with talking about a robots.txt file? Anyway, so this change basically got pushed, and it happened before Christmas. It was the end of December. Somebody pushed this change to robots.txt, and it meant that Google was told to ignore Yahoo Answers. And so it read this thing, and it somehow just took the whole thing and went, sure, we're going to ignore it, and unlisted all the pages, just gone. So Yahoo Answers, over that Christmas break, had no hits. Unless people were actually going to Yahoo, no one would find it if they were looking for questions. So hugely impactful for the Yahoo Answers team. And the lesson here was that they pushed it before Christmas, and they didn't have processes in place to find this thing, change it, and roll it back. They had to wait painfully over the course of the 2 weeks for the right person, the sysadmin or the devs or whoever it was who's going to be in control of this new robots.txt file to go up, had to come back in and fix it. So something like 56,000 pages got unlisted, and obviously that was probably an uncomfortable conversation for the product manager at the time. So that was the first ever Product Tank talk. And what I've loved is that over the years, people come up here and they just tell the stories about what works, what doesn't work, what they screwed up on, and what lessons they got out of it. I always say the best way to learn as a product person is to get in and do it, right? Just have the experience, screw up a bunch of different ways, do it wrong for some time, and then start getting better at it, right? But the next best way is to actually surround yourself with people who tell stories, their experiences, share their way of working on things, right? I remember the story of somebody from, I think it was moo.com. This is, again, going back some years, before we were even at the Conway Hall. And she was telling the story of how they tried to refactor both the front end and the back end at the same time and how it went terribly wrong. And I logged in my head, I'm like, don't ever try to refactor the front and the back end at the same time, right? I never had to do it, but now I know, don't do it. So it's by listening to people tell their stories, hundreds of people telling their stories over and over again as you spent time at Product Tanks over the years, that we've just learned so much about what works and what doesn't work in product management. And that helped level everybody else up as well. Keeping in mind, myself, Simon, and Martin didn't start Product Tank because we thought we knew everything about product and wanted to tell everybody. We started it because we were unsure of what we were doing and wanted to just surround ourselves with other people and like sense check. The first Product Tanks were very much therapy sessions. I mean, they still are, actually, frankly. But you know, there were people who are coming out of the woodworks being like, yeah, so I've been trying to do this, and I think I'm a product manager. I am a product manager, right? And what is a product manager? Am I a project manager or what? Right? That was the sort of conversations we were having back then. And it was insightful, and it lifted us all up. What I've really loved since then is that, you know, there's some people here who have been going along to Product Tanks this entire time, you know, the 40s product people sort of thing. And they're, like, a lot of them have become product leaders. They've grown up in this, and they've lifted each other up and learned as we go. So everybody who's a student 15 years ago, imagine yourselves in 15 years, the types of product management that you'll be doing as well. And hopefully you're all here lifting each other up as well. So a couple other little stories from there. Back when I was a mini product manager, a junior product manager, this is back in Canada even, I started realizing that my job was kind of inefficient, right? Creating tools and creating roadmaps and then having to redo them over and over again. So I kind of started hashing together some ideas, some sketches of what was to become ProdPad. And I don't tell many people this, the original idea behind ProdPad was a tool to help you spec and another tool to help you do roadmaps. And I actually envisioned them as two separate products, but like interconnected. And so ProdPad, before it was called ProdPad, I'd called it Specify and Mapify. But you couldn't have Specify because it would just say specify, so it had a hyphen, spec-ify. Yeah. So I took this idea to Simon, my newly minted product friend and co-conspirator on the Mind the Product, well, what was to become Mind the Product. We were working together on events at this time, and I was like, well, you know, you're a product manager. Do you want to take a look at this idea? And he took a look at it, and he pointed out that 2 products is stupid. We should make it 1 product. Cool, okay. And also the idea, the name was not right. And so we threw out the name and started thinking about something else. But in the meantime, we started hashing out what this thing might look like. Because basically what I realized is, you know, I was a product manager. I knew a little bit of front-end development. He was a product manager who knew some back-end development. I was like, oh, well, we could work together and build this. So we started hashing together the first things that were to become ProdPad, which, funny enough, we didn't name it for the first 2 years. It was just something that we used internally with our own companies to try to solve problems around managing the ideas in our backlog and managing the roadmaps that we were creating for our teams to see. And in the meantime, over those couple of years, Product Tank was going strength to strength, right? So we started off with a single meetup with like 20 or 30 people. The next time we held another one a month later, there were like 30 people, and then it became 40, and then 50, and then 80, and then 100. And it just started growing and growing. And so in 2012, that's when somebody challenged us to bring in some bigger speakers. Like, hey, could you get the likes of, you know, Marty Kagan and, you know, people like that? We're like, well, Marty Kagan doesn't just come to London to do meetups for 200 people. But, you know, if we did run a big conference and charge for tickets, then we could afford to get the coolest speakers, the biggest speakers, the big names, fly them out. And so that's what we did. And we ended up in 2012, held a conference. There was about 500 people there. And Marty Kagan was the first ever keynote, and just sort of blew the doors off and set the stage for the level of quality and level of content that we were looking for. Now, at that point in time, product tanks were possibly still in one city, possibly starting to splinter out to other cities. And actually, it's really interesting how it splintered out. It wasn't our idea. We were running these product tanks, and one of the folks in the audience, she had grown up and started her career in Amsterdam, had come out to London and was enjoying product tanks, and then was moving back to Amsterdam. And she said before she went, she was like, I'm going to really miss product tank. Is it okay if I do a product tank in Amsterdam? We're like, oh, that's an interesting idea. How can we enable this? What do we do to make this happen? And so we gave her our playbook and gave her our best wishes, and she went and started running them in Amsterdam. And then another one kicked off in Paris. Somebody wanted to take one over to Paris. And then I can't remember the order of cities after that, but it started sort of snowballing, where we ended up with like a couple dozen product tanks. And along the way, every month we were holding these product tanks with a few different speakers, all sort of covering a similar topic. Somebody in the audience, Mark Abraham, who you're going to hear from later, said something like, oh, well, you know, you should cover something like this, or you should have this person on. I can't remember exactly how you got involved, but basically, he put his neck out and said, hey, I'd like to see this. And we're like, great, do you want to like help curate that? And so he became our first guest curator, where instead of us being the organizers and trying to find people to do it, we got Mark to pick somebody out, and he was great at it. So he did it again, and more often. But we also started taking that playbook and giving that to other people, saying, hey, if you want to be a guest curator, you help bring people in. And then it snowballed some more. So we ended up having, I think, probably 30 or so product tanks around the world. And I think at that point in time, it might have plateaued a little bit, because 30 product tanks is a lot, right? There's a lot of people to keep in touch with and a lot of different touch points. But Mark stepped up even more at that point in time and was brilliant, because he then helped scale it to hundreds by taking the playbook, figuring out what was working for these product tanks, and allowing it to proliferate outwards. And so, Mark, I think you brought it to like a couple hundred product tanks in very short order. And it was brilliant, because what that meant was that we had product people all around the world, all having great conversations and sharing stories, and the talks that we were doing, a lot of them were getting written down and included as blogs in our Mind the Product site. So it really, really grew and grew from there. Oh, another thing I can tell you guys about is, do you know where the name Mind the Product came from? It was a throwaway. It was a joke, right? It was us we were hanging out in Kingley Court in Soho and talking about, what do we call the blog? The blog was something that we wanted to use so we can talk about good product management practices and talk about the stuff we're seeing here on the stage. What's a blog for London-based product people? This is before Amsterdam and Paris and all the other places. And we're like, oh, I don't know, coming up with some throwaway names. And I came up with Mind the Gap, Mind the Product. I was like, that'll never stick. And somehow that one stuck it out, right? We never thought about what Mind the Product meant as we started scaling out to different cities, right? Here we are running Mind the Product in places like San Francisco, and they're like, we don't know what Mind the Gap is. But that's okay, because it was our brand, and we were, it became a moniker for the idea of minding your product and taking care of your products in a better way. And actually, one of the things that I've had questions of over the years was, how do you get so many people coming along to your product tanks every month? How do you get so many people coming along to your conference? We'd sell at these conferences every time. And this was with a tiny team of us working on it. And when I look back, I realize what we did was just start small and be consistent, right? So people are saying, oh, I started a conference and I didn't sell all my tickets. What did I do differently? Like, what we should have done was started 10 years ago, or 5 years ago, whatever it is, and start up a little tiny meetup and do it for free, no expectations, and just hope that a bunch of people turn up and then keep turning up and keep it rolling. But there's a lot of of heavy lifting, quite literally sometimes with these events, with stacking our own chairs, or it was Simon's job to wait outside the venue early to intercept the ice that was to be used for the drinks. This is back at one of the old venues, if anybody remembers this from the boys' school. Anybody come to Product Tank at the boys' school? All right, a few, cool. And once we got to Conway Hall, once we got here, it started being more professionalized. We started getting proper video editing folks in. We started having somebody else do the bar as opposed to us kind of hacking it together. I don't think we have to put the chairs away ourselves anymore. So it's certainly got easier at that point in time to scale and bring more and more people along. But there's a lot of organic scaling with that. And over the time, there was a lot of evolution of the ways of thinking about product management in terms, right? Like I said, at the very first Product Tank type events and product camps and whatnot, the conversations were like, what is a product manager? Am I a product manager? Is it different than project management? How do I make the case that product management is needed in my company? And nowadays, people recognize the need for product management. I mean, I remember being in product before terms like discovery were used. Right? You still have the concept that you're supposed to get out of the building and talk to your users, but we didn't have these discovery processes outlined and talked about the same way. Back then, teams, I think, were very customer-driven. It was kind of like, well, customer said do X, so build X. Right? It was this proliferation of places that you could vote on which features you wanted, and then the team would just go build the best features, or the most voted features, not the best features, right? And now we've grown up and realized that it's not about being customer driven, it's about being customer informed and different ways of understanding what the customers really need. I remember working as a product manager before the term psychological safety was popularized. Ultimately I look back and I realized that I worked at a number of pretty toxic companies. We didn't have the concept of psychological safety, let alone the term for it. We didn't talk about it. And now, again, I can look back and realize, oh, right, that's what was missing, right? This is what we could have changed, but we didn't talk about it that way. These are terms that sort of grew up over the years. Stakeholder management. People didn't really talk about stakeholder management. I remember at one point in time we did a survey asking people in the audience what it is that they wanted to what they wanted to learn about at our workshops that we'd started to run. And stakeholder management was one of the options, and it came in at the bottom. People were like, nah, I don't want to learn about that. But we asked people in a different survey what their biggest problems were, and it was always like stakeholders and politics. Like, wait, why don't they want to learn about it? Back then, people thought that product management was very much kind of the hard skills, right? Or I think what it was people, product managers assumed that in order to do a good job, they had to go toe-to-toe with the people with the hard skills around them, right? Like back in the old days, you kind of needed to have either a development background or some sort of techie background to be a product manager. You don't need that anymore. As a matter of fact, that's probably going to hold you back compared to some other angles that you could come in from. People weren't really thinking about things like stakeholder management or psychological safety or some of these softer skills, which actually now rule good product management, because it's not about you being a better coder than the coders. It's not about you having, as good a handle on, running analysis as your data analytics person. You don't have to write copy as well as your marketers. What you have to do is work with the people who are good at that, understand where you fall short, and understand where your team falls short, and piece it together to get the best thing out of the resources you have. And road mapping has evolved a lot as well. So there's actually an article, and you can still find it today. It's called Tame Your Roadmap, and it was one of the first articles on Mind the Product, and it was about the way that I did road mapping. And my roadmap, I hate to tell you, was this, it was actually pretty, it was nice looking, but it was a Gantt chart. And I'd made it out of Excel, so I could drag and drop my ideas onto it and make this big version of what I thought was going to happen. And this is actually how product people did road mapping back then. And so, I thought this is going to be useful. What's actually really interesting is I still see people today sometimes using that template, even though we've put a big caveat on it going, this is not good modern product management. I still see people today showing me this template being like, this is my roadmap. And I'm like, okay. How do we bring this up to date? So I want to talk a little bit about how we evolved to change that roadmap, because I used to do it in a really bad way as well. really key thing is when we started building ProdPad, again, it didn't have that name. It was just this tool that we were using internally only. We didn't quit our day jobs. I was a head of product at that point in time at a different startup in London. Simon was a head of product or similar at a startup as well. And we didn't really spend much time talking to our users. You know, we knew some people from ProductTank, but we didn't know like lots of product people. We didn't spend the time talking to our users. We made the mistake of assuming that because we're product people and we're using this tool to solve our own problems, we can just build away on what's going to solve our problem. And what we did was we successfully built a tool that solved problems for just 2 companies, the way that we worked. So it was a really interesting lesson in learning that you are not your user. Even if you literally are your user, you are not your user. You need to get out and do that discovery work and talk to other people, right? And so that became in sharp focus when we were building a product tool for product people, and still got slapped in the face by not talking to actual product people. And so now, next, later was something that grew out of what we were building at ProdPad. Who here uses the now, next, later roadmap? Yeah, okay, so a good chunk of you. Now, next, later, when we first started building it was, well, it wasn't heard of, right? It wasn't cool at all. The way that people did roadmaps were like mostly timelines, Gantt chart style things. And the first version of ProdPad was a digitized version of that. And this was actually hard to build. Like, this is back in the days of jQuery and Bootstrap, and I learned jQuery so I could hack together this version of a roadmap that allowed you to add your ideas and drag them and stretch them and all that sort of stuff. And we showed them to some early users, and you know, some of the folks in the room were like, yeah, this is really cool, I'm gonna start using this. And we checked in with them like a month or so later, and over the course of the few weeks, and realized that the biggest request was they loved it, but they wanted to take everything in this area, right, the stuff that's right coming up in front of them, and like move it over by a month. And had I just built what my customers wanted, I would have had like some sort of multi-select drag and drop type thing. But one, that was difficult to build, right? I wasn't that good at front end anyways. We didn't have any developers besides myself and my co-founder. And 2, kind of wondering like, well, what happens in a month's time when it's all sort of stacked up and now you need to move everything over again? So we asked the 5 whys. And we dug our way down to figure out what was going on. And turns out no one was finishing the stuff on the roadmap. Right? So that month had passed, and a lot of the stuff on the roadmap hadn't been built, which is why they wanted to take everything and move it over. Now the thing is, like, I had experienced this as a product person, where you have your best intentions and you set something out and you go to build it, and then it doesn't get done for whatever reason. But I thought like it was me missing it because I wasn't a great product manager. I was still, you know, feeling pretty junior. I still felt like other product managers knew what they were doing better than me. But turns out even the great product managers, the ones who were way more senior and had been doing this for more years than me, they also discovered that they had to move everything over without actually finishing it. So I was like, if no one's finishing the roadmap, why do we have this timeline at the top that means that we have to move everything over and just sort of chase this timeline? Wouldn't it be better if we could just sort of say, here's what's in front of us, and here's what's coming up next after that, and here's what's beyond that? And myself and Simon sat in a coffee shop in Wandsworth. It was basically equidistant between our 2 houses where we were hacking away on this. And it was on a napkin, and I wish we'd kept it. We never did. But basically just drew out 3 columns, and we called it current, near-term, future, which wasn't snappy at all, but it sort of helped represent the time horizons that were in front of us. And it was built based on this idea of, you familiar with the cone of uncertainty? The concept of the things that are further away from you are less and less certain. And so that's what we were trying to express in this new version. And so it took this new version, this current, near-term, future concept, and I threw out the roadmap code that I had built so far, and I built this new, really simple 3-column version, and just sort of put it out there to the people who had been using it. And I actually wasn't sure if we could still call this thing a roadmap. The only reason it was called a roadmap was because it was replacing what wasn't working as the roadmap on the roadmap page. But we're like, is this even a roadmap? Does this count? Let's just, you know, call it the roadmap and put it out, see what happens. And people loved it. This was one of our first sort of traction points with building ProdPad, was people loved the idea that they could say, well, I can tell you the order in which I'm tackling things. I can tell you how certain I am about them. And the ones that are further away, I'm less certain about. So it gave them a sense of freedom. But it also stepped away from the idea of trying to map out your individual ideas, and instead gave you space to map out the bigger concepts, the problems to be solved. And so that was the very first Now Next Later roadmap, but it wasn't called Now Next Later. What was funny is we made the titles renameable, and we saw what people were calling them. And there was an early beta test user of ours, somebody from Foursquare. You guys remember Foursquare? Yeah, okay. I'm really dating myself here, aren't I? All right, so somebody from Foursquare started using it and renamed it Now Next Later, and then wrote about it on their blog, or on, I don't know, it was a Medium or whatever preceded that, and that gained traction. And so that's how the Now Next Later started gaining traction as like a concept. But from there, we then saw how popular this name was, renamed our own, and since then, you know, everyone's gone, oh yeah, Now Next Later, totally get it, totally works, and it's been going from there. But when we first launched this Now Next Later roadmap, it was entirely uncool. It's not how people did product management. We were trying to sell road mapping solutions, and you know, when you turned up, it didn't look like a roadmap. But today, it's the most popular version of, or format of roadmaps that people use. So it's really, really changed and grown since then. If anybody's not familiar with the Now Next Later roadmap and wants a guide on how to switch from a timeline to Now Next Later, you know, hit me up and I'll be happy to send you something on how to move over from one to the other. What it also includes is guides on how to convince your stakeholders, because individuals often get why the Now Next Later works, but the stakeholders around them often go, oh, no, I liked the old one. How do I get that back? And it helps guide you through the conversations to have so that you can work in a more lean, agile way. And so, you know, at ProdPad, we've always had a habit, I'm going to use a Canadianism here, we've always had a habit of skating where the puck is going. And so with roadmaps, you know, we got the early version out there and tested it and realized that the old way of road mapping wasn't working, and so we came up with Now Next Later. We were the first tool to implement some sort of discovery module in a product management tool. First version of ProdPad was it was idea management and like spec management and road mapping. But what we started realizing was this opportunity to capture what people were actually saying about it. And so we built in this concept of customer feedback and allowing you to say, actually, customers have asked for this. Lots of customers have asked for this one, not many for this one. Let's put this on the roadmap. And even today, we're pushing the boundaries with things like our Copilot. You know, we've been building in AI since before AI was cool. We actually had, it was called Dotbot, which is probably why it didn't take off, but it was basically like a chat GPT that you could talk to about the feedback in your backlog. And it was based on GPT-2. So it was predating ChatGPT. But you could basically say, you know, of all the things our customers have asked for, what should we build next? And it would give you an answer. Today, that's been massively upgraded, as you might imagine. So we're now using the latest GPT, whatever it is. It's encompassing not just what your customers have asked for, but everything that's on your roadmap, what your goals are, what you've achieved, what you haven't achieved, what your team has been talking about, the whole thing. So now you can say, hey, so based on what our customers are asking for, you know, what should change on our roadmap? And it'll give you some answers. And then it'll say, great, do you want me to help you spec that out? And it'll basically do your homework. It's great. What it's doing is removing a lot of the grunt work, though, from product management. I remember as a junior product manager, there was a lot of grunt work. Writing specs to get things across to your developers. Again, my first spec was 80 pages. That was too long, but actually, a lot of times to write something out that was clear enough for everybody else in the team to understand what to do, you needed a lot of time, a lot of pages. You know, how many people here have spec'd something simple like a login page? Every app needs a login page. Somebody somewhere, maybe a product manager who preceded you, wrote a spec for that login page saying it's going to have this field, and when this happens, and this happens. And I worked it out. It takes like 5 to 7 pages just to explain what needs to go into it with all the password rules and all the things that should happen. Now the thing is like a login page, all of us have an app with a login page. They're all basically the same, and actually they should be the same. You know, the time it takes to write a spec on something like that shouldn't take that time, and as a matter of fact, you know, we should be able to just sort of say it has a login page, and you know, the team or the app building it knows to build a login page, and it works just like everybody else's login page, because you don't want surprises in a login page. You want them all to work the same, more or less. And so, yeah, being a junior product manager, there was a lot of grunt work with writing detailed specs and getting them across the line, and organizing a backlog and making a roadmap over and over again for different stakeholders. The way that I did product management for most of my career is now, or soon to be, pretty obsolete, which is really interesting. But when it comes to what's happening with product management now, the essentials are still essential, right? It's still, Marty Kagan was the one who said something around product management is about finding out what is desirable for your users, what is valuable for the business, and what is feasible to build. Your job is to find, the things that are in the center there. It goes back to the Venn diagram. That's the original Mind the Product logo. You're between the tech, the users, and the business. That is still essential, right? But AI actually makes things, some of these things easier to achieve, right? When it comes to, building something that is usable. Well, AI has this tendency to build like the average, right? The same thing as last time, right? It just sort of repeats what it already has, which is actually great when you're trying to build something that is usable and functional. Because if the other one's functional, it's copying off that, then you have something functional. And you don't have to worry about it. You don't want something that has surprises in it or changes it up, right? You don't want AI to be creative with that. You want it to just create something that's functional, and it's good at that. With UX as well, it has a, actually I say that, it probably has by now, but you would hope that something created by AI creates something that, with the login flow, it allows you to go through the flow and there's no surprises. Surprises means it's hard for the user to use, it's hard for the user to understand. So AI is actually good at replicating the same things over and over. But when it comes to valuable, for the users and for the company. This is where it's really interesting, because if you were to just use AI to create something, it would create this average app that's probably already existing out there. What you want to do is use AI to create like the easiest 80%, and then you spend your time on that 20%, or maybe that 1%. What's that 1% thing that makes your app special? Right? Is it your connections to a market? Is it a particular way of handling something? Right? There's always going to be something that makes your app special and stand out from the others. And so AI is actually changing the game when it comes to making it easier to create like the base level app, but then it's still up to someone, you, to figure out what that 1% is. And you don't figure that out by asking AI, because AI doesn't know. Right? What it does, what you should be doing, is talking to users, getting out of the building, understanding what the market needs, understanding what makes your app in particular special, and then implementing that. And whether you implement that with your development team in-house or an AI or whatever, there's lots of ways of doing so, but it's your job to figure out what makes that thing valuable and stand out. And so product is opening up, right? Back in my cohort, you kind of either fell into it, or if you were trying to work for like the big companies like Google and Facebook and stuff, it was expected that you had like a computer science degree or something. And honestly, you don't need that, right? Actually, becoming a product manager now, or doing product management now, is easier and easier. It's opening it up for other people to get involved. But the same things exist, right? You still got to be talking to users to understand their constraints and their needs. You're there to orchestrate change with the time and resources that you have, right? You don't need any special skills per se. You don't need a CS degree to do this, but you do need to have those soft skills and the ability to understand the big picture and drill it down to the small picture that needs to be done next, and after that, and after that. But where I see product management going, like let's fast forward this to like the next 15 years. So as products become easier and easier to build, there's going to be lots and lots of products. Think of this like YouTube and video creation. In the 90s, there weren't many pictures and videos taken, right? There certainly aren't many videos of me pre-20. But nowadays, video is cheap as anything. Anybody can do it. Anybody can be a creator. And YouTube's actually a really interesting case on this, because there's more video uploaded to YouTube than can possibly ever be watched. However, there's still, like, most of it's pure junk. I don't know what's in there. We don't want to know what's in there. But some of the stuff that's in there gets floated to the top, right? There are algorithms and people who curate and find the best products. the best, the best videos. Well, the same thing is going to happen, right? We're going to have a flood of products. Instead of it being like this team builds this one product and then takes it to market, it could be, you know, this guy here came up with 5 products on the way to work and just said, hey, I've got an idea for a product. What about this? And it makes it. And another one, right? Are there going to be marketplaces? Are there going to be like YouTube, but for video, for products that have been made by random people, and most of them are terrible and never used, but some of them are awesome. Like that might be the future. And so what's a product manager in that world? It's the person who comes up with it, but also the people who curate, the people who understand what's valuable and find ways of bringing those to the people around who need these products. So I think product management will always exist in some way, but I think it might become a very different game as we become more curators. But ultimately, like any other role, right? Like over the years, developers, designers, everybody's had to learn new tools to stay in the game, new frameworks, new whatever. Product managers are gonna have to learn as well to stay in the game. And that'll be making use of new AI tools. And you know, with the pace of change, what you learned 6 months ago isn't relevant. You've got to keep on top of it and learn what these new tools are doing. And you know, with junior product managers, I sort of worry that you know, AI is replacing some of these grunt work jobs, you know, the writing the specs and the, you know, just grooming a backlog and figuring out what to build next and, you know, going through the paces. Because when I was a junior product manager, I was given space and time to screw it up and learn on the job and try it a bunch of ways. Whereas nowadays, you know, a lot of junior people probably aren't getting the chance to write specs and iterate on them and that sort of thing, right? A lot of these things are being done for them. But like any sort of new tech that comes through, you sort of assume, oh, this is scary, this is going to change everything, this is going to take away jobs. Or is it going to be that actually some of us who learned the old way get stuck in the old way, and the people who are adopting these new tools learn how to use these tools, they're the new digital natives, and they leapfrog their predecessors and learn how to do things faster and better and create more value than ever before. So I'm not too worried about the future. I've got a lot of faith in the folks coming up behind us. What's really key is that there's value in the process. It's in the learning and the doing, right? And you know, I've heard people say, you know, using AI makes us stupid, right? We don't think critically for ourselves. But I think the future goes to those who think critically and they adapt and they craft products for themselves. You know, they figure out what value means to them. They figure out how to craft based on the resources that they have for themselves. You know, I think it's really key to use the tools that we have. Don't shy away from AI, adopt it, make use of it. But also remember to look outside the box. You know, and ultimately, is that so different than what product managers are doing today? You know, they're learning and they're adapting and they're using the tools at their disposal. So ultimately, the future is uncertain. I don't have all the answers. I'm not going to presume to have all the answers. I can look back at the last 15 or 20 years and tell you what I've seen. But I'm curious about what's going to be happening in the next 15, 20 years from now. I'm always open to learning and discussing. I want to hear what you guys think is going to happen in 15 years in product and use that as a discussion point. And we can use that to shape our own story. So in that, I want to say a big thank you for listening in and hearing the story and being part of this community. Thank you very much. Thanks, bud.
Thank you so much, Janna. Amazing. I think I do wonder whether Yahoo Answers ever recovered from that mishap. Excellent. So just another opportunity to ask any questions here in the Q&A. Just while you're doing that as well, I was curious, Janna mentioned that she fell into product. I also fell into product. Has anyone else here fallen into product? Okay, quite a few. I think it's quite a common pathway into the product world. Okay, up next we have James. James has got a fantastic personal story to share with us this evening. I'm very excited to bring him on stage. He's going to be talking to us about personal resilience. Resilience is a very important thing as a PM. You're often in the limelight, and when everything goes wrong, it's all on you. So I'd like to welcome to the stage, James.
Evening all. It has been a while since I've been up here, and frankly, it's not changed that much, which is nice. You have to excuse me this evening. I'm going to make a slight change from my usual approach. Firstly, I've been bugged recently by the way that technology gets in the way of us rather than brings us closer together. So I'm going with no slides. I'm going old school with some prompt cards, and I'm going to talk to you. The other reason for the prompt cards is that my short-term memory has been somewhat battered this last year or so. So this is a story of what happened over the last year, the hacks and the approaches that I used to get through a tough year. Because I've had a number of people explain to me recently that product management is going through a little bit of a tough time. So perhaps some of these resilience approaches may help you when you're going through things, either with product management as it evolves, or with your individual companies when they hit the skids from time to time. We know this happens. So things started for me back in, prior to this, mind the product, 10, 20 years. I had a great time running this thing. It's been fantastic. We sold the business to Pendo in 22. I took a year or two off, and then things took a step sideways. I was going to go and do a new startup, and instead, January 24, I got diagnosed with a brain tumor. Somewhat of a fly in the ointment there. Put the startup on hold for a little bit and had to attend to that. So this is the story of how I got through that, some of the approaches that I employed to get through treatment and keep life on track, keep things moving. And hopefully some of these things are useful to a few of you here today. So, bit of a shock. And obviously the first thing you do is start talking to those around you. And one of the things this leaves me feeling conscious of is that we talk a lot at big tech conferences and big tech events about how we're going to have the tough conversations. Until you've told your kids you've got brain cancer, you don't know what a tough conversation is. I'm sorry, but you're not having tough conversations a lot of the time. You're just having badly planned conversations. So, tip one, take a step back and actually think about the people you're talking to, the impact you're having on them, what kind of outcomes they would like to see, and how maybe you can help them see that vision and work towards a shared goal together. Don't knee-jerk it, plan it. In my case, I started assembling a team almost immediately, not just the medics, but also friends and community, the people that I knew I would need to help get me through this. ProductTank globally has been my community for well over a decade, and so many people reached out with messages of support. And when you're going through something, that helps. So the same is going to be true of you when you're in jobs and things are going wrong. Don't be afraid to reach out and let a few people know that maybe you need some support. Maybe you need somebody to check in on you every now and again. Assemble that team, lean on the community. In my particular case, I then went into, okay, we're going to do some brain surgery, then we're going to do some radiotherapy, then we're going to do some chemotherapy. This is going to be the very definition of not a fun year. So I had to put together an approach. How the hell was I going to get through this? And it started with personal routines. Well, actually, it started one step before that. It started with a shared goal. As I said, I've got a couple of young kids, teenagers now, and I spoke to them and I said, the first goal is to get through treatment. Once we get through treatment, we all get to go skiing together. That gave us a shared goal. It gave us a thing that we could aim for together, a thing that we could all pull towards. It also gave me something else. It gave me a reason to drag my sorry ass out of the couch every day and get up and be active, which when you're going through radiotherapy to the brain and chemo is not the easiest thing in the world. But I knew there was no way I would be able to complete on that goal unless I kept some sort of activity going. So, yeah, they hit me with radio and chemo at the same time. You know what? Screw you. 5K run every week, Brighton Beach. Wasn't easy, wasn't fun, but it got it done. Likewise, your mood can take a hit from the chemo from time to time. So, music on a regular basis just to change the mood and lift the spirits. Things like a daily meditation session, literally just 5 or 10 minutes on the couch, listening to the Headspace app and unplugging, just creating a bit of mental calm, a little bit of space to then set me up for the next day, and away we go again. Practicing a certain amount of daily gratitude. A number of people have suggested to me that gratitude journaling can really help when you're going through some tough times. In my particular case, I'm not much of a writer, not journaling anyway, but what I did do was try and get into the habit of taking a moment or two each day to remember what had gone well. Things like open skull surgery. Apparently the standard is 3 weeks on a high dependency ward after that. I was lucky enough to be home in 3 days. So it wasn't fun, but there are things there that I can be grateful for. I found another patient who discovered his tumour when he went full tonic seizure at the wheel of his car doing 60. I found mine in an optician's chair. Vision Express raised the alert, saved my life. Thanks very much. But certainly something to be grateful for. I came across a visualization exercise that a friend of mine described, and it also put me in mind of one of the great product thinkers of our day, actually, Christina Wadke, over in California. She's written some wonderful books, delivered some brilliant talks from Mind the Product over the years, so if you don't know her, go look her up. On her bio, in multiple places, it contains a single line from a Walt Whitman poem. I contain multitudes. And I was thinking about that, walking along Brighton Beach one day. I was trying to take some air, and feeling properly beaten. It was a low moment, and for some reason that line came to mind, and I visualized it. I'm a father, I'm a son, I'm a bass player, a trumpet player, a cook, an entrepreneur. I snowboard, I cycle. I am all these things and more. When you gather those things, you can feel that power within you. You can feel that strength. What can you really achieve? Visualization exercises like that can be incredibly powerful. From there, I took a cue from a brilliant movie called The Martian. I'll do you a very, very brief flashback. There's a moment where his lab on the surface of Mars explodes. And Matt Damon turns to the camera and says, "In the face of overwhelming odds, I could draw only one conclusion. I was going to have to science the shit out of this." So I very much set about doing exactly that with my diagnosis and the AI tools at my disposal. A friend of mine switched me on to Perplexity, which is spectacular for medical research. And things like your white blood count crashes during chemo, cold showers. Okay, that's simple enough. We can absolutely have a crack at that. And then talking to others, turns out that they also help with things like keeping your moods up. If you're going through a tough time, they can help with depression. But also they can help with mental resilience. They can actually help you toughen up mentally. Because what's happening is you're getting in a shower, you're having a nice shower, you put your hand on the tap, you know it's going to go cold, you know it's going to be bitterly unpleasant, and you push yourself to do it anyway. You can actually improve your own mental fortitude with that simple exercise. The other thing I did was go looking to create a little accountability. I'm going to do my yoga daily. I'm going to do the meditation sessions. I'm going to get some movement, some exercise. I'm going to eat better. And then I'm going to journal about it. I'm going to write what I'm up to, just so that I know that somebody's keeping an eye on me and keeping me honest. It was partially catharsis. It helped me process, because frankly, going from an eye test to brain surgery in 10 days is pretty traumatic. But it helped keep me honest. It helped me know that people were keeping an eye on me and keep going at it. We've all probably studied enough about web psychology here and there to know that humans who are stressed make bad and irrational decisions. I suspect we've all seen it enough times. In my particular case, yeah, going through a diagnosis like that, that's going to leave you feeling pretty stressed and irrational. So what I did at that point was realize that I couldn't trust my own lens. So you start looking for someone else's lens to trust. In my particular case, I chose my father. He'd always looked after us incredibly well when we were younger and done us proud, and that felt like the right lens to me. But I would encourage you to do the same here. If you're ever in a situation where you're not sure which path ahead to take, and you're not sure you entirely trust your own lens, whose can you trust? Pick someone you admire. Pick someone you believe would handle the situation admirably. Try and put yourself in their shoes for a while. Finally, one of the biggest lifts that I got came from a long-time friend of mine, Jamie Leonard. Jamie reached out pretty soon after diagnosis with one of the funniest lines of the entire time. "Dude, I've seen you on a night out in Amsterdam, you're going to be just fine." He christened me the tough chap to kill at that point. And that kind of became a personal mantra that I wanted to live up to. So we stuck that on a t-shirt. Cancer fucked with the wrong guy. And I wore that running down Brighton seafront to terrify the tourists. It was great. But that very much became a mantra. So tough chaps to kill is a thing that I've shared with a number of other brains patients in that community over the last 6-9 months or so. We thrive in adversity. We punch back. We know that we only get beat when we stop getting back up. This is about those who refuse to be written off. Those whose only move is forward. The survivors, the relentless. People who believe that they can turn setbacks into fuel. It's not about playing safe. It's about standing tall and refusing to be anything less than unstoppable. So I got through the radio and the chemo. Having recovered so fast from surgery, they decided, we can do radio and chemo at the same time. Apparently that one's tough, to the extent that only 50% of people get through treatment. The other 50% quit because the side effects are just too rough and you can't do it. So I managed to get through that. But this is also about how you take some of these approaches and apply them to keeping the rest of life moving as well. So during the course of last year, I didn't just manage to keep moving and get things done on a personal level. I also kicked off a new startup, Rodeo. So we are just closing in on finalising around there, 300 grand pre-seed. Investors include people who are prospective customers in their own right and want to give us a check to help us go faster. So I think that's pretty strong as validation goes for an audience like this. I also published last year, books on Amazon. It's essentially a few different things. It's some of the stories of how we grew Mind the Product over the year. It's some of the lessons of how we applied product management to building an event services business and media platform. And frankly, it's advice for anybody else who wants to grow a community. And particularly if they want to make that in some way commercially sustainable. Just taking a little bit of money along the way to help make these things keep happening. Because fundamentally, I believe community organisers do incredibly impactful work, but they are incredibly badly supported. So Rodeo is the tool set that we're building to address that. And unlike platforms, the big platforms out of Silicon Valley that happily hoover up all of that data and sell it, Rodeo will do that, absolutely. But then what we'll do is share the proceeds and do a revenue share with the community organisers, giving money back to them in order to help those communities around the world more successful. The world is more polarised than ever, and that is in part the broken promise of technology. Technology promised to bring us closer together, further apart than ever because we yell at one another from behind keyboards instead of turning up in person and building human connection. So that's been my story for the last year or so. There's hopefully a pile of tips and tricks and useful things in there that maybe you don't need to use anytime soon, but maybe they're now in your kit bag when you do. But I hope this has been useful. Feel free to tackle me anytime. Thank you.
I know that ProductTank for me over the years has been a great, particularly when I've been dealing with issues in the product space, and I think that the community coming together, as James mentioned, can have a massive impact on that. Up next, or actually just before up next, we have another opportunity to add some questions to the Slido. We have been moderating these in the background, so if you haven't seen them added, don't worry, they will be before we get to the Q&A at the end. And then, without further ado, please allow me to pass on to the wonderful Mark Abraham, who took ProductTank to the world. Thank you
very much. Just a quick show of hands. Who of you has seen in last year or so an article, blog post, LinkedIn article about how product management is dead? Yes, definitely. I see plenty of them. You know, we won't have any jobs, right? Because AI is taking over. Janna was alluding to it. The untimely death of product management. This is just one of them that I've come across recently. But I want us to take a moment to pause and ask ourselves, is product management really dead? Right? Should we start thinking about alternative careers? Just think a moment. Because I don't think it is. Right? Even more so, I don't think, and obviously I'm not a clairvoyant, but I don't think it's particularly helpful to get overly dramatic or anxious about what product is going to be in 10 to 15 years. Right? I think it's very much alive. It's not going to go away anytime soon. I really believe that. I think about surgeons, and if you think about the tools that they use in the 1900s, and having listened to James's personal story, I'm glad that they've moved on since, right? But the core role of a surgeon has remained unchanged, right? Their role is still to help people get better. Just the tools that they use have evolved over the years. I know it's a cliche, but it is true. The only constant in life is change. And we're going to talk about how the role of product management is evolving, right? And how we can thrive in the age of AI. And as I said, I'm not going to stand here and try to predict the future of product management. What I will do is talk about the evolutions of our role as product people and what we can do to adjust along with those evolutions. And we'll talk about three specific things here. We'll talk about the changing landscape for us as product people. We talk about evolution, not extinction. So we'll talk about the evolutions of product management as a role, as a craft, and what that means for our toolkit as product managers. See a lot of sad faces. I talk to my peers suffering from redundancies, companies letting go of product people, not having product people in the first place because they can't see the value of them, right? So that leads to a lot of insecurity. And what's happening is that changing landscape, and I see two main evolutions. One is an increased focus on return on investment. Now, arguably, I'd like to think that I've personally and my teams have always been focused on commercial impact to the business, not just focusing on the customer and solving customer needs, but also really thinking about what it means to the business and how we can improve the bottom line. But my friend Dave Washer talks about the reckoning, and that's the increasing momentum around product managers getting a better reputation for not caring necessarily about the bottom line and delivering commercial impact to their businesses, right? Not seen as a value-adding contribution to the business and therefore easy to get rid of. Now, what that means in my mind is that you have product managers who have what I see as a very narrow view of product management. Right? In terms of their accountability, they're accountable for delivering a feature. Right? Their focus, and it's not a bad thing, is very much on the customer and solving customer problems. Right? The broad product management view is really focused on delivering against outcomes. How can I impact outcomes? And from a focus perspective, yes, they're still focused on the customer and have empathy for the customer, but they apply the same level of empathy that they have for customers to their internal stakeholders in the business, right? And sometimes I hear like, yeah, but a junior PM, they shouldn't be, they don't have time to think about these things, right? I think they really should, right? And I encourage my junior product managers to think about how can you drive impact, not just for the customer, but how can you move the needle on a KPI that's important to the business that you work in? And if you struggle with that, start with thinking about these kind of KPI trees, right? Thinking about what I'm doing, how is it laddering up to overarching business goals? Right? You look at your impact drivers, look at specific KPIs. I'm not going to go into detail of KPI trees today, but it's a very nice tool to really start thinking about how is what I'm doing laddering up to a particular metric that is important to the business going forward. Now, the second evolution is more significant in my opinion, and Janna already spoke about it, is the impact of AI, both in the products that we build, but also in on our ways of working as product people. So in terms of the products that we build and will be building, we'll see that the customer expectations of those products will be evolving, because they will be expecting products that are real-time, are highly personalized, give answers in minutes, changing modalities, so it might be on the phone, you might be using Meta's AI glasses, voice is becoming more prominent. So we'll see that changing. And then the second impact of AI is on the ways of working, right? Like Janna was saying earlier, we're already seeing that AI can do a lot of the kind of more mundane execution-related tasks much more efficiently, much more quickly, right? Whether it's writing user stories or product requirements or even generating code, creating prototypes, AI can really help us there, right? Think about people like me, right? The clue is in where it says, you know, I'm new to coding, please write lots of comments to help me understand. This is what I said in Cursor, for instance, right? But it helps people like me to do things like vibe coding, really quickly coming up with some ideas. So I have a prototype, I have a starting point for discussion with my designers or with my customers. And what it means, having tools like that and practicing like vibe coding, is that the lines between product design and engineering become a lot more blurred. And that's not necessarily a bad thing, because it means that we can be much more collaborative and move much faster in terms of getting products out there and delivering value to both our customers and our businesses. So that's a changing landscape. We talked about increased focus on return on investment, and we talked about the impact of AI on both our products that we build and the ways in which we build them. Now, what that means for us as product managers is that we need to evolve, right? We're not going to be dinosaurs, we need to evolve. And that evolution focuses on two things. First of all, on the products that we build. Let's look at that, right? Because when you talk about AI-based products, that means different things to different people. But an important distinction to bear in mind is whether you're in the business of training your own models, and when you do that, as you can imagine, when you develop the product, your focus is on data, that's effectively your user interface, or you're building on existing AI models, existing LLMs, for instance, integrating a chatbot with OpenAI. Right. To keep it simple, I see three main categories in terms of AI-based products. Right? I see products that have a touch of AI. I see products that radically transforms the jobs to be done or the outcomes using AI, or you have AI native or AI first products. So when I talk about products with a touch of AI, so they've got AI sprinkled in the product, right? Think of Grammarly using AI to provide suggestions, writing suggestions that go beyond your traditional spell check, right? So that's sprinkled in the product right there, taking into account tone of voice, for instance. Or the second category, which is all about how you can use AI to radically transform a very traditional job to be done. Think about players like Synthesia or Actions AI that use AI to generate videos, right? The job to be done, creating videos, nothing new, nothing revolutionary, but the way you can do it has been changed quite dramatically by players like these using AI. And then finally, the third category, where your product is very much AI native. It is based on AI, so it can be a chatbot or products like Character AI, where you're actively engaging with with AI-generated avatars and personalities. Whichever category your product falls into, so whether it's a product with a touch of AI or it's radically transforming jobs to be done using AI or it's AI native, we need to start thinking even more about things like data quality. So the input, where do we get the data from? There's techniques like RAG and MCP, but also think about the output, so the data that comes out, really evaluating the quality of the data. When we think about workflows, and people talk a lot about agents and agentic AI, we need to think about how do we orchestrate the workflows, right? How do we orchestrate different agents talking to each other, right? We need to think about how we as humans are still in the loop of those workflows. And finally, when we think about user interactions, right? Particularly with AI native products, where it's all based on data, one big change is that the output is more probabilistic, right? We're used to software, it's very deterministic. You put in A, you get B out. Now suddenly it's a lot more open-ended, and we're trying to hide the complexity that sits underneath it. But how do you deal with that from a product perspective, right? Evals, evaluating the output. I really enjoy using Claude's console. Anyone use the console in Claude? I find it really useful to create prompts, but also do check, right? I can set up my criteria to get an evaluation of the outputs that I get from using a certain prompt, if they match, let's say, my tone of voice, if they're accurate, and be able to tweak it. I talked about workflows. This is a workflow I created a few months ago on a platform called Cassidy AI, and there's similar tools out there like N8N, for instance. But the idea is that you build in these steps, but you build in these evals as well as part of the workflow, so you can really keep an eye on the quality of the outputs. And last but not least, I talk about the probabilistic output, user interfaces. You don't want to know how annoyed I got with ChatGPT when I was trying to generate an image for today's talk, and it really started messing up. I wanted to remove some words, and it started putting in these boxes, and I was like tearing my hair out for what's left of it, right? But it's a really simple example of how do we make these user interfaces much more intuitive, so when you get stuck, and especially if you're not super tech savvy or whatever, you know what to do. So we talked about the products that we build and how they will evolve, again, whether they sprinkle of AI, AI native, or jobs to be done, and we talked about those focus on data quality and so on and so forth. But in terms of the role of us as product managers, the core aspects of our role are not going to change. I know you heard Janna talk about it earlier. I break it down in 4 buckets. We, as product people, we have been and will be thinking about these 4 core aspects: the why, the who, the what, and the how. Most basic question as a product manager: why is the problem worth solving? Right? What I think is evolving, though, is that we need to think a lot more, coming back to what I said earlier about that increased focus on return on investment. We need to think about, why does this make sense for the business? But increasingly, we also need to start thinking about, why do we need to put AI in the product? I see this tendency now, and I'm sure it's a bit of the hype of, yeah, we just slap AI on the product and we call ourselves AI first, right? Is there really a use case for it? Does it make sense? Is it the best solution? Does it provide the right user experience? Second question, who is the problem worth solving? Again, that question is not going to go away, right? What we will see is that we'll need to consider a wider range of personas. Think about agents, for instance. We need to think about data-centric interfaces and how we build up trust, right? So that users can actually trust the outputs that the AI generates. What is the solution that will solve the problem? Again, an aspect of product management that won't go away. What will be evolving is that we'll talk a lot more about data, and it will become even more the shared currency between us as product managers, working with engineers, working with designers, our stakeholders. And again, when we think about the solutions, that question of, why do we need AI in the product? What's the best solution here? And how we will solve the problem and take it to market is a question that's not going to go away. What we will need to consider is that in terms of the execution, the lines between product, design and engineering are getting more blurred. Again, it's not a bad thing, but we need to think about that as we start thinking, as the way we execute things is evolving. And then also, as we said, the automation of tasks that we're doing, where we used to spend a lot of time on, again, Janna mentioned it, writing product requirements, documents, user stories, project planning. AI will be able to help a lot with that stuff. Right? So I just want to show you how the core aspects of product management are not going to go away. Yes, they're evolving, like everything else evolves. But on top of those 4 aspects, so the why, the who, the what, and the how, we've got these 3 key things that are going to be even more important, which again are a core part of our role as product managers, thinking about human judgment, right? AI can come up with lots of solutions, suggestions. What's the best one for our users? What's the best one for our business? Critical thinking, constant communications, talking to customers, talking to stakeholders. Claude, as much as I love the product, is not going to do that for me, right? You still need product managers, you still need humans to drive those communications. What is evolving, though, with the introduction of AI is this need for, as Gary Tan from Y Combinator talks about, agency and taste. So agency is about prompting, setting up the right prompts, and taste is about evaluating the output. I would look at those 2 things a bit more broadly, and I would actually say that agency is also acting fast and acting decisively, because with AI, we can move a lot faster. We can have a prototype very quickly. We can get something in the hands of customers very quickly. Taste is not just about evals and evaluating the output generated by AI, but it's also evaluating the solution, evaluating strategic choices that we need to make as product managers. So these are the 5 core aspects that we'll continue doing as product managers. 3 actually, and those 2, agency and taste, are really being reinforced by the introduction of AI. Now, what does that mean for our toolkit as product managers? That toolkit is also going to be evolving. So we're using AI. The one caveat I want to give here, because I've seen some of our peers making this mistake where AI becomes this magic bullet, right? You just dump some of your customer research data into ChatGPT or Claude, comes up with a few recommendations, and you follow them blindly. Or you ask ChatGPT to generate a strategy for you, does that really nicely, and you think, done, I've got a product strategy, I'm good. I would encourage us to still see AI as your intern, really well-intentioned, but lacking a lot of context, right? And we, as product people and the teams that we work with, we need to provide that intern with the right amount of context and guidance and instructions, right? And how we do that, we can use some of these tools. Again, if you look at those 4 core aspects, that are really useful if you want to do market research or segmentation, if you want to do requirements. But if you don't do anything else, I really encourage you to, if you're not doing that already, focus on any of the tools that help you with rapid prototyping. Because I found personally that really helps you to get things in the hands of customers quickly, helps you to start a meaningful conversation with your team or stakeholders. And again, they will be evolving, and it's really good to have that first-hand knowledge of how those tools work. Right. I appreciate, and this is just an example of what I did. Basically, you provide the context because that's what these tools need. This is when I used Lovable, you set the context, you set the criteria, but again, treat your AI as the intern, right? And then you start vibe coding. I love that. Whenever I say it, I feel like I'm 95 years old because it's like something that the kids say. But the idea that people like me can just come up with ideas, make changes on the fly, no coding experience whatsoever, and still have a working prototype at the end of it is pretty powerful, I'd say. Appreciate you might not be using any of these fancy tools, but you might just, I say just, but you stick with ChatGPT or Claude and you run prompts. And just from a terminology perspective, I just want to quickly make a distinction between system instructions, structured prompts, and user messages, because they're all considered prompts, but they do different things. So system instructions, as I showed you an example just a few minutes ago, is really useful to provide AI with context. Structured prompts are very much, do this, give me this answer, list 5 alternatives, whereas user messages is you chatting with the AI. And give you some examples just to get you thinking, if you're not doing this already, of sample prompts, right? When you think about the why, for example, my target persona is X. What are their main pain points with respect to this particular problem or need? So you might get a good starting point from just that simple prompt on what problem is worth solving for your customers, right? Or you might ask about competitors in a particular space. I'll give you an example. When I looked at it for a book recommendation space, and I used a simple prompt of give me strengths and weaknesses and give me no more than 5 competitors in that space. Again, you always need to check it. I'm not saying it's a magic bullet, but if anything, you get a starting point, a really useful starting point very quickly. Same for thinking about the who. Who is your target persona? Who are you solving the problem for? Now, you'll see that this is more of like a system instruction, right? So it's much more detailed. And again, I don't expect you to read everything that's on the slide. That's not the point. But this is a good example for me where if you really want to get useful output from running that prompt, you need to provide the AI with the right level of context of what you're looking for, right? And just as a side note, I find, again, I have to talk about Claude, but the project capability in Claude really useful for this purpose, because that's where you really set up nice instructions, and then you can start running questions or running prompts against it. If you don't want to go down that Claude project route, you can just run a prompt like this one, right, where I said, create a detailed user persona for a patisserie vending machine, as you do, right? Again, it gives you a nice starting point. The what? Janna already talked a lot about PRDs, and it pains me to think about how much time, probably collectively in this room, we've spent on writing PRDs. Again, there's a number of useful prompts, and you'll find the ones that work best for you to start writing requirements or start writing user stories. Right. Simple example here. Right. Again, a good starting point that will help us on a day-to-day basis. The how, things like writing test plans, starting to think about project plans, makes me shudder, again, how much time we've spent on Gantt charts and all the rest of it, right? There's specific tools for this, but again, you can use simple prompts like this one. I am building a task management app. Draft a delivery plan that lists all the key milestones, and off you go. Right? So I've whizzed through some of the key tools and some of the prompts that you can start using as product managers to really evolve, really let AI into the way that you work as a product management, and really show you that what we're doing as product managers is we're not dead yet, we're just evolving, right? We're adjusting, right? We're still continuing focusing human judgment, critical thinking, continuing to communicate. If anything, we'll have more time to focus on that, whether it's with our customers, whether it's with our internal stakeholders. And the additions, I would say, is to focus more on agency and focus more on taste. Now, you might sit here and think, where do I start, right? Start small, as we heard before, right? Start with, if you're thinking about human judgment, focus on impact. I showed you the KPI tree, but think about how can I deliver that impact? Critical thinking, what's the right solution? Does it need AI? Does it not need AI? Right? Constant comms, think about how you can use AI to reduce the lags between designers and developers, for instance, or even things like chatbots that can query Jira, so that people who don't necessarily like Jira don't have to go in there, right? Because they can just ask the bot. When we talk about prompts, start creating your own prompt library. Again, start small. Well, what are the prompts that you commonly use in your day-to-day work? And finally, with evals as well, start creating your own assessment criteria and start assessing the prompts that you create or the output that you get from those prompts. And I really believe that if you start doing those things, again, even if you start small, what we're doing as product managers, we're evolving with the changing landscape, we're adjusting to the impact of AI on our roles and the product that we build, and we're most importantly evolving from being super insecure about our jobs to just adjusting to the changing times. Thank you very much.
Amazing, amazing. I imagine we're all very pleased to learn that product management is absolutely not dead, and I'm really glad this is recorded. I'm definitely going to go back and be looking at a number of those prompts, so thank you very much, Mark. Brilliant. This now brings us on to the Q&A section. So what we're going to do is we're going to take a couple of minutes to bring out some chairs to the floor. We'll then get into around 10 to 15 minutes of Q&A, going through all the questions that people have been asking on Slido. If you want to take a moment while we bring out the chairs to pop to the bathroom, please do. And then we'll be back here in about 2 to 3 minutes. Thanks, folks. Lights up. Okay, brilliant. Thank you, everyone. Cool. So we're just going to do a few minutes here now of Q&A to try and get through all of the questions that everyone has for the wonderful folks here up on stage. So if you are listening for Q&A, please do grab your seat and we'll make a start. Thank you, everyone who's been adding questions. Please feel free to continue to add questions during the Q&A, and if they get voted high enough, they'll pop up on my screen, and I'll be able to ask them to the panel here. Actually, the most voted question here is not a question, and it says, James, thank you for being so open, honest, and genuine.
Oh.
You are already a legend, and you're actually so much more. Congrats on kicking cancer's ass. Couldn't have said it better myself. Brilliant. Okay, next question is, so I guess off the back of Mark's talk there, a lot of AI tools floating around, and even James mentioning Perplexity. Curious about which tools have helped you focus on the top X% of high-value product work by offloading your routine tasks.
What was the top?
Like the top high-value tasks, so top X% of your high-value tasks.
High-value tasks. Yeah, can I say that I haven't seen yet. I've mostly been using AI for kind of low-value tasks, if that, you know. So really getting started, like Janna was saying, right, and you've seen my examples. I'm not going to spend 5 hours writing a PRD because I lose the will to live, right? So maybe you can call that a high value, right, if you can do that quickly. But that's really where the value comes in for me, is really getting started on something. I definitely found it useful for prototyping because it helps me to get my ideas across. But you still need, like Janna was saying, you can chime in here as well. You've got these lovely tools. You still need that creativity and that high value and that value add on top of it, is my experience at least.
Yeah, Mark is absolutely right. It's about augmenting your existing brain, right? Ultimately, product management is a series of decisions, somebody making those decisions, and you can't offload that to AI, but you can augment it, right? I mean, back in my day, we were expected to kind of like remember all the things in our backlog, or like remember where we put that information, or, you know, remember what our goals were, and there's a lot of things to know, and actually you don't need to have all that in your brain anymore, right? I mean, this is why we built the ProdPad Copilot the way we have. It's basically like a layer underneath all of that, so that all the questions that you might tap your product manager on the shoulder for, or all the things where you're going, oh, what did we think about that, or what did we do about that, where was that? It sort of pulls it all in together. So you can use AI to have like this breadth over the things you're doing, but then use it to like surface options for you. But ultimately, you're the one who makes those decisions, and it's the decision making that's really important.
I guess, question to everyone here, what's the favorite AI tool if you have one? I appreciate there's different use cases here, but is there one that really stands out to you that you keep going back to every time?
Yeah, I'm a simpleton, but like I said in my talk, I like Claude, right? And particularly project functionality. I create a project for everything, right? That's my habit. But yeah, that's my favorite.
Nice. Across the group, any other favorites?
Ooh, I mean, I've already mentioned my own, but I also use ChatGPT a ton, just for general stuff, research stuff, you know, all sorts of things like that. Honestly, the best tools are the ones that are at your fingertips, and so, you know, it's a matter of getting in front of people, getting your tool in front of people. Those are the ones that tend to get the most usage.
Excellent. I guess coming to that point about having built your own, right? Mm-hmm. That's something that many of us may have to do at some point in our product careers. Curious if you have any advice for folks trying to go from not just using the tool, but actually trying to build one out themselves. Yeah,
absolutely. Actually, this is really interesting. The most interesting thing about building with AI is that the rules on how you test it are just thrown out the window, right? Like, with usual product features that you build, you can basically say, you know, I want it to do this, and when this happens, this is the right result, and if this happens, that's a bad result, right? We can change that. And you can generally figure out where that bug has come in. With AI, it sometimes gives you surprising results, and you don't know whether that's good or bad. And so figuring out how it came up with that and getting it to talk you through its thinking, That's been a lot of the work that we've done with our own, is figuring out, okay, well, how do we make sure that it doesn't hallucinate and that it can explain where it came up with this stuff, and is able to show its homework without becoming too verbose as well. But sometimes tracking something back and going, wait, that was actually better than I expected, but why is it better? What has it done there? And it can be interesting to spec for and to test for.
Excellent. Has anyone else have you experienced? Oh yeah, go ahead.
I think one of the thoughts that comes to me at this point is the amount of people I've heard over the years say that the art of product management is not about having all the answers. It's about asking better questions. And that's one of the places that AI really can help you out when you're looking at something, starting to be more creative with the questions that you might ask. One that I was exploring actually just the other day from Emily Tate, who's lurking around in here somewhere. One of her favourite ethics questions for product managers. If we launch this, what would 4chan do? Stick that into GPT and see what that gives you.
I guess AI is very much dominating the comments and questions here. What one thing that's come up is around AI product managers. And I guess throwing that out there is what are your guys' views on AI product management or AI titles in roles?
I mean, I wonder if it's a trend like all the other product managers. I mean, I've seen technical product managers, data product managers, and growth product managers, and all sorts of things, right? Right now we're calling it AI product manager, but soon enough I'm sure we'll just call it product manager again, right? Because everyone who's working in product should be using AI. And when you say AI product manager, are you talking about somebody who's, building the AI product or using AI to do their job? I don't know. Titles are weird and I think just made up. They are just made up.
Does anyone know a quantum computing product manager? Because that would be the next thing, right? I think my point is also, being slightly facetious here, is yes, AI product managers are often used for, again, particularly people who work on AI first or AI native products. But again, my argument is that the core tenets of a product management, of a product manager, are not changing, are exactly the same.
One here, which I think that I'll read out how it's written, but then I think I'll ask what I think they're saying here. So they're asking, have you ever had any Yahoo Answer moments in your careers? And I think what they're kind of asking is, this is a safe space, and that's part of what the community here brings. What has been a moment in your career where something has gone wrong? You would be able to share with us.
Yep. I once emailed a customer so hard it broke their servers. Basically, it was like some notification system we were building for our app that they were using like as I think it was like an intranet thing, and somehow it like kicked off like notifications from what our product was doing. It was using their email server, and it did like thousands upon thousands of emails, and their email server went down, and they were mad.
It's actually a great question for people who are thinking about getting involved in ProdUctTank in future. When these things first started, we were often looking for people to come get involved and tell stories. And people would say, I've only been in product 5 or 10 years, I don't have that many stories, I don't have anything to say. Disagree. Literally everybody who works in product can think of a time that something went wrong and what they learned from it. Tell that story.
I was going to say, what time are we going to get kicked out of the venue, right?
Perfect. Okay, I'll probably close with a couple more questions. There's a few more specific ones. So, Janna, to you, I guess you talked about a lot about now, next, later, and how as a PM you present that up to the executives. I guess being an executive yourself, how do you go the other way with that? How do you, as an executive, make sure you're receptive to that approach, and what can other executives be doing to be more receptive to their PMs in that space?
Yeah, I love that question, because now that I'm on the other side, I feel that sometimes being like, okay, well, we're doing this next. When is that going to come out? And I mean, fortunately, having grown up as a product manager, I have a sense of humor in line with the product development process. And I know that it's not about when it necessarily comes out. It's about making sure that if you're spending your resources on this thing, then you are spending as little time as possible, or no extra time than needed on it, right? You're maximizing the chance that this thing goes out first, so that it doesn't get sidelined by something else. And that's really what the Now Next Later is about. It's about prioritization. It's about saying this is the most important problem. If this is the most important problem, then solve this problem until this problem is solved. And, you know, sometimes you think, oh yeah, that'll probably take a month or so, or a week, or whatever, and product development takes its own turns. And so whether it takes 1 week or 2 weeks or whatever, it doesn't really matter as long as that's the most important problem to solve. Now the thing is, like, you know, also we know that we don't live in la-la land, right? Sometimes things do have hard dates, right? If it's a regulatory date or, you know, some sort of strategic date that's tied to something in the calendar, like if you have to ship something in time for the school year to start because you work in that sort of area, then you have to make sure that that information is set up front so that people know that it's coming and can flex things around it, right? Because if you're going to have something with a hard date, you're going to have to put the work in to make sure you know how big that thing is and how long it's going to take so you can start working on it on time. And you'll have to add the prerequisite buffers and all that other stuff and expectation that it will go over. Now, if you were to do that for every project, what would happen is all that extra buffer time and all that extra work spent with trying to figure out how long it's going to take ends up taking more time. It's more costly to deliver something on time than it is to deliver it based on the work that people can, the time it would take them to do the work if they're given not unlimited time, but time to focus on the one thing at a time. And so what happens is companies who have dates after dates after dates end up slowing themselves down in order to get stuff out at the requisite times. And this is why you get big companies who have hundreds of developers who are all trying to work on a series of projects, all these little marches to get things out on time, and they're being outperformed by a team of like 5 people or 1 person or whatever who just builds the next most important thing and then builds the next most important thing. They're not stopping themselves by trying to create all this accountability around when things are going to be done and how much time is spent on it before they get into it. They just get into it and build it, and that goes faster. So on my side of the table now, when I'm looking at it, I recognize that actually, if I were to ask people to be like, you tell me when this is going to be done, I recognize that I'm actually creating this penalty, right? If we're all about return on investment, I want the best return on investment. I want my team to build the most possible stuff that's of value in the least amount of time. That's how we compete. So I know that it's not just about, you know, me getting the date or people sticking to, you know, promises of when things are going to be delivered, but it's about getting the best value, best return on the efforts that go into whatever we're building.
Thank you. Brilliant. Okay, final question. This is for everyone. Over your careers, you've obviously got vast amounts of experience between you, and together you've been on this journey with ProductTank. What past trends have surprised you, and how did you deal with them? AI is the hot topic right now, but what else have you guessed and worked through?
I can think of one. I remember back in the early days of ProdPad, when we were building it around the time that mobile apps were becoming like super key. Everyone had mobile apps, and also then tablets had come out, so you had to have like, you know, not just an iPhone app, but an Android app too, and an iPad app and things like that. And I remember being faced with it. We were a tiny company. It was literally myself and my co-founder hacking away, and being faced with the idea of, oh, we need to hire an iOS developer and an Android developer to get the app out. And I made the bet that actually, let's hold off on that, because I bet that web trends, web development, or mobile web stuff is going to lift up enough that people will no longer need iOS apps. And actually, that mostly has come true. You still have people building apps for like a lot of the big apps, but for the most part, it was actually so much easier to just build for mobile flexible web. So back in the day, you didn't have mobile flexible web. Pinch and zoom was the technique. But now there's so many more techniques that you can just build one app and have it flex to all of them. And I think something similar is happening now. I mean, okay, I saw one recently around dark mode. Everyone needed dark mode. And we actually said, you know, we're not going to build dark mode. We actually waited until we saw somebody build, somebody built a Chrome extension that just turned your app into dark mode. We're faced with another conundrum right now, which is, oh, we love the app, but we need to use it for our team in Japan. Can we have it translated into Japanese? I was like, you know what? No. Because I say no a lot, and that's good product management, honestly. Okay, right now you can use Google Translate, but apparently Google Translate doesn't do very good. But I bet there's probably an app out there. I need to discover it. Somebody will point it out to me. If you know of this, let me know. But a better Translate app over top of your layer of that uses a Chrome extension or something like that and translates better than Google Translate, uses ChatGPT or better AI translations. My bet is actually we don't need to build the whole system behind to translate it because you have an app that translates it to your view. And actually this is where I think the web is going, or interaction with the web, is that, you know, we as builders will build an app that provides value, and then you will have a browser with a series of plugins, or whatever we call them in the future, that will translate it to your needs, right? So whether you need it in different sizes or different colors or different languages, or you need different accessibility criteria or things like that, those will be things that in the past we spent all this time agonizing over how to build. And in the future, I think the personalized web will make it so much easier so that the pressure of getting it looking just right for you will be on your side to configure it for you. I think it's a really interesting thing that we're seeing.
Yeah. I think there's also a significant backlash coming in the area of generational AI particularly. You're already seeing an awful lot of people like, look at that photo, it's got 6 fingers on the left hand, this kind of thing. More and more you're seeing generational content. We are floating in the stuff, and I think people are going to start coming back more and more to genuine content, which brings us back to events and people seeking human connection again, and these things will rise. And finally, we have a quote from Sam Altman himself to support this. Somebody put him on the spot on Reuters TV and said, in an AI future, what jobs are safe? The future, Sam says, is premium in-person experiences, or events, as the rest of us call them. So certainly I think you're in the right place with this.
So you asked about past trends, right? Slightly left field, maybe controversial. I'm still puzzled by product management certification.
Yeah.
So maybe someone on the way out can enlighten me about, I've never done them, but it seems to be this promise of you do a 2-day kind of course, you get a certificate and you're a full-blown product manager.
Yeah.
I'd love if someone who's been on this course can prove me wrong or tell me what the added value of those certificates
I think that goes in the same bucket as when I passed my driving test.
Right, okay.
My dad said, congratulations, you can have the keys, now you learn how to drive.
And actually, a bit of a defense for product management certification, and this is big coming from me because I didn't do education or anything in product management or anything like that, right? I don't have any certifications, right? I am not qualified to do this job, whatever. But I remember when I was junior product manager, and I wanted to, I had my eye on doing stuff like project management because those people made more money and were in the fancy office. And so I got a certification from the folks behind the PMI. It wasn't the PMP, it was the CAPM, like a junior project manager type thing. And I spent some hours, I spent the money, and I did the test and all that sort of stuff, and I got this thing. And when I actually went out there and did anything project management, it had nothing to do with the certification, right? But I was a junior product manager and I had this certification, and it turns out that was the thing that got me the edge when I was trying to get the job in London. They said, oh, well, you must know project management. It looks like you've put some effort in, and therefore you just stepped ahead of other colleagues with more with more qualifications. I remember thinking, like, God, I just took like this little test online, but whatever. And actually, I think certifications in a world where it is really competitive can be the thing that makes you stand out, but they will not teach you product management, right? They are not actually an indicator that you know product management. They might just be an indication that you have put some work in to study some stuff and you did well on a test, and that was about it. So employers know that, and candidates know that, but it's created this sort of cycle where everyone feels like they have to have a certification to get in. But I mean, we look at certifications and go, you don't need it to do the job, but sometimes it can help get the job. So it's a double-edged sword, and I don't really know how I feel about them in the end.
Yeah, you see now, I know we're going over slightly, but you see a different tendency where I see lovely LinkedIn posts. It's either saying product management is dead, or they're saying, I'm only going to hire you if you've got a GitHub repository and you've been using XYZ tool, otherwise I'm not even speaking to you. But if you take that little threatening tone out of it, basically there's definitely something to say for actually show your taste and show your product sense through actual products or prototypes that you've built, rather than maybe a shiny certificate.
Yeah.
Sure, it has its value.
Yeah.
I'll take it all back. But I think that's where we're moving towards.
Yeah, absolutely.
Brilliant. Look, folks, it's been wonderful. It's been amazing to have the original crew back for our 15-year anniversary. Thank you, everyone, for joining us this evening, and I wish you a wonderful rest of your night.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thanks so much.
Of course.